Hello pioneers, and welcome to Nikola's Tesla Network. Today's video is all about a massive global shift that is almost here, one that will change the way money moves across borders forever. We're talking about ISO 20022, a name that may sound technical, but the impact it will have on international finance, banking, and even the future of digital currencies is huge. And since the big transition date is getting very close, especially with November 22nd approaching fast, this is the perfect moment to understand what's happening and why it matters to all of us. Today is November 19th, 2025. In just 3 days, the world's financial communication system will undergo one of the biggest upgrades in modern banking history. This isn't a small patch or a minor update, this is a complete transformation in how institutions talk to each other about money. For decades, banks have used old, limited formats to send transaction messages. But now, the world is finally shifting toward a modern, data-rich standard called ISO 20022. To understand what this means, imagine that banks have been communicating like people sending short, cryptic telegrams, tiny messages with just enough information to push money from one place to another. The SWIFT-MT messaging format, which has been around for ages, was basically that: simple, restricted, and limited. A message might only say something like, "Person A sends money to person B." That's it. But ISO 20022 changes the game completely. Instead of a telegram, it's like sending a detailed email packed with information. Under the new system, a message doesn't just say someone sent money to someone else. It includes the sender's full name, address, account details, the receiver's information, invoice numbers, tax details, the purpose of the payment, and even shipment or tracking data if it's linked to a business transaction. Everything that might matter in understanding the payment is included in one message. This shift brings two huge advantages. First, the data becomes richer and more meaningful. With more details traveling instantly with the payment, banks and companies can automate processes that earlier required human checking. Reconciliation, the long, boring task of matching payments to invoices, could go from taking days or weeks to being completed in minutes. Second, transparency becomes much clearer. Because each transaction carries detailed background information, suspicious or fraudulent activities become easier to trace and stop, making the global system safer. Now, here's the part that makes November 22nd so important. For years, the world has been in a transition phase where both the old MT messages and the new ISO 20022MX messages coexisted. Banks had time to upgrade, test, and prepare. But this coexistence ends on November 22nd, 2025. After that date, for cross-border payments, only ISO 20022 compliant messages will be accepted. The old system will shut down permanently. It's like the world flipping a switch overnight. This means every bank that participates in international payments must be ready. If they're not, their transactions could fail, get delayed, or even be rejected entirely by foreign banks. And any institution still sending outdated message formats may face penalties or lose trusted partners. That's why banks around the world, including in India, have been working urgently to update their systems. In India, banks are upgrading in 3 major ways. First, their payment systems are being modernized to support the new standards. Second, many are building translation systems to convert old format messages into new ones so that nothing gets stuck. And third, the most challenging part, updating their internal IT frameworks like KYC systems, anti-money laundering checks, and fraud detection software, so they can understand and use the larger amount of data that ISO 20022 brings. The level of readiness varies. Big private banks like HDFC and ICICI are almost fully prepared because their technological infrastructure is already strong. Public sector banks are in the process of upgrading, but because many rely on older legacy systems, the transformation takes more time and complexity. Cooperative and small banks are the farthest behind, but since they do limited international transactions, the impact on them will be less. But just imagine what happens if a bank is not ready on time. International transfers could slow down drastically or fail altogether. Foreign banks may refuse to interact with them due to compliance issues. Heavy fines could be imposed if the messages lack required data. This is why banks are treating November 22nd as a do-or-die deadline. Let's step back and look at the bigger picture. why is the world putting so much effort into this? The answer is transparency, speed, and modernization. Cross-border payments have always been something of a black box. If money got stuck somewhere, it was nearly impossible to know exactly why or where. With ISO 20022, the journey of every payment becomes visible. Banks, regulators, and businesses can monitor the entire path clearly and instantly. This is not just an upgrade, it's a financial revolution. This upgrade also supports India's future goals. As the country moves forward with innovations like the digital rupee, CBDC, having a modern global messaging standard is essential. If the digital rupee is ever used internationally, ISO 20022 will be the language it uses to communicate with the world. Now let's talk about something that many viewers are curious about. How does ISO 20022 connect to cryptocurrency, especially to projects like Pi Network? This part often causes confusion, so let's make it very clear. ISO 20022 does not approve, certify, or validate any cryptocurrency. It is simply a messaging standard, not a payment endorsement. Crypto assets do not automatically become ISO compliant in any official sense. Then why do some crypto projects like XRP, Stellar, or XDC claim to be ISO 20022 ready? It's mostly about compatibility, not certification. These projects are building their systems in a way that could integrate smoothly with banks in the future. If cryptocurrencies want to connect with traditional finance someday, they must speak the same language. That language is ISO 20022. So when these projects say they are compatible, they are saying they have prepared their infrastructure for future collaboration opportunities. Now what about Pi Network? At the moment, there is no official link or announcement connecting Pi Network with ISO 20022. Pi is still functioning inside its closed ecosystem. Transactions occur within the network itself and do not interact with global banking systems yet. But in the future, when Pi Network fully opens its mainnet and attempts to connect with global payment systems or financial institutions, compatibility with ISO 20022 could become an advantage. It would make integration easier and smoother, simply because the network would already be speaking the same language that the world's banks use. To wrap everything up, ISO 20022 is becoming the new global operating language for financial communication. November 22nd marks the moment when the world officially moves on and leaves the old system behind. India is working vigorously to match this pace because adopting this upgrade will modernize the country's entire financial framework. And for cryptocurrencies, ISO 20022 is not a certificate but a gateway, a possible bridge to interact with traditional finance in the future. For Pi Network, the relevance of this standard will depend on its future direction and how widely it aims to expand. One big question remains, though. If ISO 20022 truly becomes the universal language of money, does it also become the gatekeeper of the financial world? Will only those who adopt it thrive, while others fall behind? As we try to bring innovation into a single standard, are we opening doors or closing them? These are questions worth thinking about as we step into this new era.